Welcome, fellow gamers. This time we are taking a trip into history, a historic journey into Victorian London, courtesy of Ready at Dawn. As we enter into the second generation, and the indication of this gen's possibilities, we have some real gems of games to look forward to. One such gem is Ready at Dawn's brand new IP, The Order 1886. Within this new, most likely franchise game, Ready at Dawn have crafted their own unique and subtly altered steampunk historic view of one of my most favoured periods in history, Victorian London. Set amongst the decadent disarray and grandeur of the Big Smoke during a very bleak period in history, it was a city of extremes, from high-rise affluent areas in direct contrast to the dense and swamped slums of squalor and poverty. It was also a time of huge population growth, which put such a strain on the city and resources. This bore out with pollution and disease. Cholera was a real epidemic back then, and like the sewers poured into the Thames, the foul stench and oppression personifies the era and is made all the more grandiose due to the amazing dominant architecture of the time, coming off the back of the recent Gothic revival. But it was a time of arguably the greatest innovation, with steel constructions and the age of steam. It brought many firsts like railways, electricity and the combustion engine, with some of the greatest inventors occupying this historic log of the era, like Heinrich Hertz, Alexander Bell and Thomas Edison. There is no doubt that Ready at Dawn have chosen a smorgasbord of an era to cherry pick from, and they have taken the facts and bent them ever so slightly to create a world that is believable. It is a hybrid of the industrial beginnings of the time and the mythology of greater legends and myths, blended into a rich world and lore that all feels believable. Based on the Knights of the Round Table, and the namesake the Order is a group of knights sworn to protect the balance of peace between the humans and the half-breeds. That happened many centuries ago when mankind split, echoing the divide between the rich and the poor of the time frame of which it is set. Using the power of Blackwater, a small vial that the knights wear around their neck, to not only enhance their abilities of healing and speed, but also to prolong their life, make them godlike, but not immortal. In these troubled and war-ridden centuries, they have fought against this enemy for long enough. And as per the base inspiration, the Knights are a small eclectic group sworn to protect humans from this newly emerged evil threat to mankind. As the centuries wore on, the poor see the Knights as a representative of the rich and ignorant of the plight of the great and washed. And this then leads to a revolution and a new threat of rebels and maybe sympathisers to the half-breed and rally against the Order, leaving them with yet another foe to contend with. This duty or service brings with it a great weight on the Knights, and Galahad in particular is the game's protagonist, and the game as we follow his story throughout. The power they gain is received from a poisoned chalice and is a double-edged sword, as they see others grow old and die around them, and the world they knew grow, change and become less and less familiar. This pain is demonstrated in the scene we see here between Sir Galahad, Lady Igraine and Marquis de Lafayette, with Sir Galahad clearly showing that his pessimistic and bleak outlook and his distancing from the mortals that he not only protects but also aid him.
Save your prayers, Lafayette. There is no God to help him.
And this brings us on to the characters in the game. Sir Galahad, he is a long-serving and well-respected knight of the Order and has been fighting this battle for centuries, and is the third to bear the name Sir Galahad, with his real name being Grayson. He is close friends with the oldest and most esteemed knight, Sebastian Mallory, who is given his name Sir Percival, and he is the second person to receive this name in the Order, the most senior of the Order, and seems he has a very long and close friendship with Galahad. Thirdly is Isabeau d'Argile, or Lady Igraine. She is close to Galahad, and they seem to have a close bond or even a love interest, but the Order rules forbid this. She was Galahad's apprentice, and she has been trained into the Order of the Knights and invested in them, and this tension seems to evoke throughout the scenes that we see, including the one earlier where you see her look at him as if the mortal that had died was somebody they knew from early childhood. Where Isabeau feels the loss of this, Sir Galahad is completely detached. Galahad seems to be questioning his reasons and motives behind the Order and the battle between the half-breeds and the rebellion. And finally we have Marquis de Lafayette, who is a historic figure from the French and American revolutions, and due to his tactical knowledge in battle, he was approached by the Order and brought into the group. Because he's so young, he has not yet earned his alias tag. He is the youngest of the group and the most gung-ho. His approach seems to be head-on, straight into the missions, which seems to grate a little bit with Grayton's more methodical and tactical approach. And this is something that seems to have a bearing on the gameplay and their interaction in the scenes that we see. From the latest E3 shown, we have now have a glimpse of the true threat to the Order's existence and survival. A half-breed transpires to be a werewolf, or a lycanthrope, from Greek origin, based on the werewolf myths. The Lycans are true overpowering monsters from some other werewolf films, notably the height and imposing figure from the recent Dog Soldiers movie, and the intelligence and cunning callousness of such great films as The Howling, which is a great film if you ever get a chance to watch it. The design is very foreboding, and from the E3 reveal we have a clear showing of how horror and suspense is incorporated into the game, and shows a diversity that we have not yet seen before. You can see from the transformation the Lycans have gained a terrifying physical presence, made even more intimidating by the intellect of the foe and its callous actions of toying with Sir Galahad in confidence of its superiority. And now I get into the graphics. This game is a real showstopper, having visuals that were, well, nay, are the first real merging of CG versus real time. This game is 100% real time, with every scene flowing into and out of gameplay with no visual sign-off or handover, and it truly brings us into the era of seamless transitions of story scenes and gameplay. In fact, they've even gone so far as to not have the engine play a video scene at all. It cannot play embedded video movies, which is a little extreme, but I understand why they've done it. With the exact same models used in the game and in the cutscenes, just looking at this game is such a visual treat on the eyes, from the detailed facial animations and movement to the physically based lighting model. The mixture of pre-baked light maps and real-time lighting is the best mixture of power versus performance, with objects, floors and general scenery using a mixture of pre-baked lighting and the impressive dynamic light system in the game. The Hdr Pipeline in the Order is truly remarkable and adds a great deal of weight and believability to the world and a great degree to the characters therein. It is all based on a physically based lighting model, and this is a huge step from the previous gen. Second Son and Rise are good examples of this process in action. But in the Order, the process has been greatly improved and advanced within the engine. Having gone through the details of each material, like steel, copper, even taken hundreds of photographs of London's cobbled streets, bricks, cloth, everything in the game is based on a full physical scan of its texture and how light interacts with it. Then each of these has a relevant material template created for which it can be added to any object within the game, and then have added layers from the texture composites to maps to show lighting, water, dirt, even rust on a per object basis. And within these composite maps they also reduce the aliasing of the texture, which is backed up by a very impressive and clean 4x multi-sampled anti-aliasing solution. Now the fact that they're using MSAA tells me that this is not running a deferred lighting pipeline, as these two together are incredibly bandwidth hungry, so they are most likely using a forward plus lighting pipeline, which works better on the bandwidth and works certainly better with transparency textures anyway. One of its other controversial aspects is indeed its aspect ratio. Running a 1920 by 800 resolution, it is a native 1080 screen size image as per any Blu-ray movie. And to be clear on this, if you removed and made it a borderless full 1080 height image and used even SMAA, it would be far less of a performance hit on the system than what the game is currently running. So expect a very clean and CG look game when this launches. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if this will be the cleanest game on this gen so far. Now you may have heard of physically based lighting before and thought to yourself, what is that? Well, it is simply a far more approximate lighting model that greater demonstrates how light interacts with the world around. Things like subsurface scattering on skin, which is how the light penetrates just beneath the skin and is absorbed or diffused into it, or how a torchlight bounces off a metal plate, glass mirror, shiny door. I'll show this in the scene now. If you look at where Grayson is walking down the corridor and the light shines here, look at the reflection on the wooden cupboard to the left of the screen and the way the light highly reflects off of the brick wall at the side. Again, you can see it here when the light is held up towards the wall. You can see the way the light instantly bounces directly back off and creates a bloom effect. But when it passes by the door and the floor, it's dulled and absorbed into the wall. It kind of hides away. It handles lights by its energy, with an object like a metal plate reflecting it back, or a wooden door, for example, seemingly absorbing all the light and just leaving a blurred specular. You can see volumetric light shafts from the torch. You can see dynamic shadows from all the objects in the room, including the cabinets. It really is a sumptuous visual treat. In fact, I could do a whole video on lighting, but maybe that is for another time. There is simply so many little touches in this game that I find compelling and visually pleasing. Look at the way Sir Galahad's hair flicks and moves back as he's shooting the gun. You can see it moving around. The little subtle reflections in her eyes. The way when you move the gun around in the cutscene, you can just move the object around and actually flip it over like you can in the paper and the gun. They've put little touches in the game so that you get involved in the cutscenes and you're not just putting the pad down and waiting to play. There is so much detail in the facial expressions, the textures on their forehead, the shadows, the reflections, and of the objects in the game. They really have spent a lot of time putting a lot of effort into this game, and I'm sure it will be a very believable world that we'll be enjoying. And let's not forget the Lichen. Werewolves don't get the best end of the stick. Vampires are cool, and I always found werewolves were my favourite creature. So I know that it's something that I'm certainly going to get involved in, and I hope they play a big part of the game. They certainly look foreboding and menacing enough, and with their intelligence feel like a real threat in the game. This sequence here, when you see the Lichen sniff the floor and pick up the blood, the detail in his face, the animation and the vividness of the scene really does send shivers down your spine. I completely love the scene where it pins Galahad against the wall and calls him a swine. It really is like a cat toying with a mouse before killing it. The whole game is centered around the whole view being behind the camera lens and looking like a film. So there's dirt on the camera, the way you get effects, and you get dirt and light reflections off the camera lens. The whole thing has taken that into effect. You've got chromatic aberration going on with the light edges and the fusing of the light, the fringing basically, and that is a big deal to me. They've done it very subtly and it works really well. They are completely and utterly going out to create an illusion of you watching and playing an interactive movie. Now that's getting a lot of stick, and people are going to jump in and say it's full of QTEs and all that kind of stuff, missing the whole point of what QTEs are and what they mean. It doesn't have that. It engages you in action events in certain scenes just like any other big game. Uncharted, The Last of Us, Tomb Raider, you name it, God of War. Big games use that technique throughout the generation. I've always used them, and they work if they're implemented well and they don't take away from the core aspect of the game. This game has many aspects and a lot more left to show. And the attention to detail is astounding. You can see the way the blankets and the cloth billows in the wind at the shootout in the street, the way the particle effects spark and fall down. When you'll find the thermite gun, you can see you light up the area around, so you basically send out the volumetric smoke and then you ignite it with the spark as you fire it in. The characters, if they're hit with it, they cough and choke because they can't breathe, and then they catch on fire. The amount of detail and power and physical post-processing effects going on in this game. You've got reflections in the guns, specular maps, highlighted textures, bloom, particle effects. It really is a joy to behold, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it and play it. Not only for the story, the characters and the mythology and the lore that they've created, but also because it's goddamn pretty. Running at a perfectly tasty native resolution at 30 frames per second, giving it that sweet, sweet filmic feel. And just for anyone doubting that it is indeed real time, you can see here where Grayson's arm bugs out and the goggles just kind of float back towards Sebastian Mallory. Superb. Both in its narrative, art style, period and execution, and visuals that I am very, very excited to play. With the launch date of February 20th, 2015, we have a few more months to wait, and Ready at Dawn have plenty of time to tweak, tidy and improve on what we already see here. And if that does not grab you by the throat with excitement, then maybe you're just not liking this game. Yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, if you like it, then please subscribe for more content. It really helps me immensely. Give it a thumb up if you enjoyed it, and let me hear your thoughts and feedback as always below. Anyway, you guys and girls take care, game hard, and I will see you soon on the next one.
Save your prayers, Lafayette. There is no God to help him.